the honors of ensuring that African customs and traditions are transmitted from one generation to another and that they continue to be upheld has rested upon the shoulders of Africa's leaders and traditional rulers from time immemorial. Welcome to the Summon, the African Summon, where we connect you to Africa and African culture. In today's edition, we continue to explore the subject of the African traditional marriage as it obtains among the people of the WESOP village in the Mbangem subdivision of the southwest region of Cameroon. We have with us one of the leaders of the people, the custodians of tradition. He is Chief Atabe Kwelle II, and he is reigning chief amongst his people. Please invite your friends, families, and loved ones to join us for this must-sit-in edition. While you're at it, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and share. Wherever you may be, I urge you, please stand on your feet as we welcome His Majesty Chief Atabe Kwelle II. You're welcome, Your Majesty.
Thank you very much. And I must commend you for the wonderful job you're doing to valorize our culture and to preserve and conserve it for future generations who can get access to it through modern information and communication technology. I think you are doing a great job, and more power to your able.
I greatly appreciate you, Your Majesty. Chief, would you mind giving us a little insight into the southwest region and the WESOP village where you lead?
Yes. Like you said in your introductory remarks, I am Chief Nkwelle II Atabe, the ruler of the people of WESOP in the Mambon clan of Bangem subdivision. Bangem subdivision is one of the 3 subdivisions that make up the Kupe division in the southwest region of Cameroon. We are Bakossi, who are of the Bantu stock, which is one of the 4 ethnic groups that makes up the Republic of Cameroon. And we are settled along the plains of the Maningouba Highlands, along the Maningouba Highlands, around the Twin Lakes, the Maningouba Twin Lakes. The Bakossi people are generally believed to have descended from Nkwe'entan, who is our founder, and the Queen Mother Soombeeh. Nkwe'entan was a hunter, and he settled along the Maningouba Plains, from where he got married to the Queen Mother Soombeeh, and they had several children who migrated into what constitutes the different villages and clans that make up the Bakossi community as we have it now. But the Bakossis are mainly settled in the Bangem and Tombel subdivisions and in part of Nguti subdivision, where they are settled together with our brothers, the Mbo and the Basossis. Generally, in Bangem subdivision, you have 68 villages that make up the Bangem subdivision, divided into 8 clans. And in Tombel subdivision, we have 55 villages. And there are some Bakossi villages in the Nguti subdivision. So I am equally the president of the Bangem Subdivisional Chiefs Conference, a position I've held for a year, and I have another year to work with my peers to see how we can develop our community.
Your Majesty, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to help us understand more about the customs of our people. And as the custodian of custom and tradition, we really value your input on the subject of marriage. Would you mind telling us when a man or a woman in your area are interested in getting married, what do they do?
Okay, before I'll get into that, I would want to make a general comment with regards to our African customs and tradition, because there are a lot of our brothers who consider the tradition as a form of witchcraft or as a form of primitivity. But I think that that is the essence of who we truly are. And it is high time Africans valorize their customs and tradition and make the best of it. Because when we talk of our culture or our tradition, it involves every aspect of our life, from our cuisine to our architecture, the houses we live in, to our way of relating to the supreme being, whether we decide to call him Duke like the Bakossi do, or Loba as the Douala would do, or Chineke as the Nigerians. But it is time that we get back to our roots and valorize it. Because I think even our development is very much tied to our customs and tradition. If we make appropriate use of it, we can make an economy, a huge one, either through tourism, through architecture, even through restaurants and anything. There is a lot that African can benefit from its customs and tradition. That said, the Bakossi, like for most African tribes and most African communities, used to have marriage mainly on the basis of childhood betrothal in the yesteryears. And it was mainly a family affair between the two families. This childhood betrothal was as a means of maintaining social ties, either friendship or something. And so the marriage engagement started in those days as early as upon childbirth, where a promise was made by the both families. If a man had a son earlier on, a friend will promise him that, okay, to maintain their relationship, to make the bond between them even closer, if once he had a female child, he would betroth that child to his friend. And so as early as upon childbirth, the rites will begin, because even the camwood that was used to rub the child to make the body firm and prevent them from other diseases was usually brought in at such a moment by the family of the potential groom. And so as early as upon childbirth, a young maiden was already married. But over time, with the coming of modernity and other forms of education, with our exposure to other customs and tradition, it has been now a union that begins. The young man, the potential groom, and the young lady meet. Now, once they meet and declare their intentions of getting married to each other, depending on their families, they would find way to communicate to their parents. But the most common way is that the girl child will always easily get the information through to the mother, and then they inform the father of the house, and by extension to the head of the family. But for the boys, since many of the times when they get to the age of marriage, they already have pressure from their parents, it is usually a welcome relief anytime the announcement is made that they have seen a young girl that they want to get married to. And so both of them announce their intentions, identify the spouse to their parents. Once they identify this, the next thing is a very symbolic and very significant stage in the whole process, which is a background check, a kind of vetting process of the intended spouse. And not just the intended spouse as an individual, either as a young maiden they are marrying to, or the young man who is coming to marry. It is vetting of the whole nuclear family as a whole. And this vetting process was generally very important. First, to ensure that the two young people who intend to be tied in marriage are not in any way related by blood. Secondly, generally, it was to make sure that the family into which the young man is getting married, or the family that is coming to get married to the daughter, is not a lineage that is suffering from a past curse, a generational curse, to make sure that they do not have any history of barrenness, to make sure that they do not have any history of having committed atrocities in the village, to make sure that if, most especially on the part of the bride, that it is not a lineage which has been notorious for infidelity, where they have had a history of divorces. And so, in a nutshell, it is to make sure that there are none of these negativities. That is why this background check is done. And usually, those who are involved in the background check, sometimes without even the information, without even informing the young people who are to get married, are the parents, and then the maternal uncles in the Bakossi land, whom we know as the Bala. They play a very important role in getting such information. And so once there is the approval of those who were doing this background check, and there is nothing negative to worry about, then they can proceed now with the rest of the procedure, begin with the knockdown.
So, Chief, I really appreciate you bringing that up. It just goes to emphasize the importance in the way each family raises its children and interacts amongst itself. Those things are not without consequences. The way they speak, the way they treat others, the way they carry out their activities, eventually have an impact on how their sons get married and how their daughters get married, because people who come to marry into their family would check those things out and commonly probably ask from friends and relatives and those who know them to know whether these are really people to be tied to.
Exactly. And it should be very noted that, like for many other communities, marriage for the Bakossi people is not between two people. It is between two families. And that is why this background check is very, very essential before anything is done.
Thank you so much, Your Majesty. Would you, after the investigation is done and the families are pleased with their findings, how do they proceed from there?
Okay, if it is disapproved, generally the parents find the best way possible to dissuade their child from getting married. And we generally know that the best way is usually through threats. They expose what they would have noticed, which is negative about the other family, and try to discourage their son or daughter. Sometimes when the children are obstinate and want to go ahead, the parents use different methods to try to force them from staying away from the person whom they say is not good for them. It may even mean that the parents refuse to attend either the knockdown or the traditional marriage ceremony. And any serious parent who investigates and knows that a son is coming to get married to his daughter, or they are coming to get married to a daughter and the parents are not there, cannot proceed with it because you do not have their blessings for the marriage to go on. But if it is approved, then they proceed now with the rest of the marriage, beginning with the knockdown, which the Bakossis call the Nkwe'entan. Now, with the knockdown ceremony, it involves on the part of the boy, him going with a delegation of his parents and the head of the family. And being in a patriarchal society, the head of the family will mostly refer to the head of the father's family, because it is not just an affair of the young man, the young bachelor and his parents, but it involves the nuclear family. That is why the head of the family must be there. And once the announcement is made to the potential groom's family, the parents must be there. The head of the bride's family is usually there. And since on the occasion of the Nkwe'entan, they're expected to give a list of the bride price, this delegation is even bigger because both parents of the bride, both families of the bride have to be represented by their family heads so as to come up with a list of the items for the bride. The maternal and paternal families of the bride must be present during the Nkwe'entan, because they have to come up with a list of some of the items and some of the financial tokens that have to be given to certain people. So with the knock-door ceremony or the Nkwe'entan, once the family of the groom comes, they will state their intention to the family of the bride. And they usually make use of the analogy of either a beautiful flower or a beautiful hen, which they have seen and which they want to take possession of. And it should be noted that unlike in later stages, during the Nkwe'entan, the father of the groom must be very specific about the particular maiden that he wants his son to get married to. And then once he makes that announcement, there is a response now from the potential bride's father, who sends to call for the maiden in question, and will announce to her in the presence of the mother that these people who have come here have come to sought your hand in marriage. Do you recognize them, and do you permit me to go ahead discussing with them? At this moment, once the potential bride answers in the affirmative, then she now leaves the parents to continue the discussion. And at this time, the father of the groom now hands over a symbolic bottle of hot drink, most popularly the schnapps, and a financial token, an amount of money. Now, this amount of money, it may not be a very specific amount, but generally what is important is that this money goes to three people: the father of the bride to be, the mother of the bride to be, and the bride herself. And so this generally can be considered to us to be a kind of traditional engagement. And so once the father receives this item, he asks the bride for approval. Should I take them? She'll say yes. Should I take them? She'll say yes. And if she answers the third time, then she leaves them now. And the rest of the discussion now is about the future stages of the marriage, particularly planning the Nchande'eh, which is the traditional bride price, or celebrating the traditional marriage.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Majesty. So we move from, do they set a date? They set a date for the next stage, the Nchande'eh.
Okay, now the rest of this Nkwe'entan, or the traditional marriage, is now about setting the date for the Nchande'eh. And this date of the Nchande'eh is set by the groom's family. Okay. Then the bride's family now concert, and they come up with a list of the bride price, which they hand over to the groom's family, and they both agree now on the date of the Nchande'eh. What we call the Nchande'eh is the bride price, which comprises of two things: material items known as the ngabe, and the finances or financial token that has to be given, known as the lengab. Now, when this list is handed over and a date is taken, both families now separate and they start preparing for the traditional marriage. And the Nchande'eh is usually now just a part of traditional marriage. But permit me to note here that in the yesteryears, on this occasion of the knock-door, they would only pick a date when they'll come and get the list. But because of reasons of distances and the busy schedule of people now, they would just give the list on this date. But previously, it will mean on the day of the knock-door that they'll take a rendezvous when they'll come and collect the list.
Oh, so when they meet for the knock-door, an appointment normally should be taken to return for the list for the Nchande'eh.
Yes, but now because of reasons of distances and time, for convenience, the list is just given on the occasion of the knock-door.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Okay, so we have the list, the material and the financial parts to it.
Yes.
What happens next? Who's involved?
Okay. Now, this list, like I said earlier on, comprises of some material items of traditional value. Some of these items would include salt, palm oil, wood, food items like rice. It will involve a bottle of whiskey, a ram or a sheep, a cock, and a dressing for the father of the bride. That is the traditional sanja or a loin, a shirt and a hat and a walking stick, while there'll be a loin cloth for the mother and some of our sisters who played a very significant role in bringing up the bride. But generally, there are no specific quantities to all of these items. It is just that it will feature on the list of almost all families. It depends now on both families in coming up with this list. But for as concerns the finances, there are 3 lists that are prepared usually, or one list is prepared but comprises of 3 different people. The immediate family of the bride, that is her parents and her siblings. Then the mother's family, that is the bride's mother's family, will constitute a list of people with different amounts depending on their closeness to the bride and the role in playing in bringing her up, as well as the same thing for the father's family of the bride. So generally, this is what constitutes the Nchande'eh. Now, once the date is taken, in modern times, the Nchande'eh is done together with the Wonge, which is the traditional wedding. The Nchande'eh is the act of paying the bride price, while the Wonge is the celebration of the traditional wedding. But for reasons of convenience, in most recent times, all of these are done within one ceremony. And sometimes it's extended to family members and to friends, and people can even employ the services of an impresario to coordinate. But this ceremony is expected to take place in the home state of the bride's family. It takes place in their family compound. And usually when they meet after the pleasantries, when the ceremony begins, it is usually at this instance, the father of the bride who speaks first. He declares that he has seen guests who have come. He has called his brothers and will introduce a few members of his family to welcome those guests, but he doesn't know what would have brought them. In turn, the family of the groom will now respond that they haven't missed their way and will announce their intention, which, like in the first instance, they will use the analogy of either a very beautiful flower, a beautiful hen, or some priceless gem or jewel that they have come to possess. So at that point, the family head, not necessarily the father of the bride, the family head of the bride's family will still respond now and say he has many of those flowers or gem. And at this time, they will do a parade of the different many unmarried maidens in that family for the groom's family head to select which of the hens or flowers exactly he has come to pluck. And this parade is generally known as Soombeeh. May I also precise here that in the yesteryears, at this particular moment, it will mean that the family head of the bride's family will send to call unmarried maidens from the different compounds of the brothers who are around. But like I said, since in modern times it is done within the confines of one compound, they will parade several maids who are clothed, they are covered, and it is a task now for the family head of the groom to be able to identify who particularly is the maiden he has come to marry.
Okay, so just to ask you, Your Majesty, if somebody had the time, would you recommend that it still beautiful to invite the maidens from all those compounds to come in to participate in the activity?
Yes, I think that that is the beauty. That is the beauty of it. But like I said, for reasons of convenience, that is when they just remove them from a room. But these maidens, obviously, on the day the bride to be getting married, it is not only she who is there with her sisters. I think even her cousins and extended family members are there present. So once they parade the different maids and they identify the particular maiden they have come to get married to, they unveil her, and then she's now taken back to the family head of the bride's family. Now the family head will now give the opportunity for the bride's father to drink from a calabash. We have our traditional calabash. They'll pour palm wine into it. He will drink some of it and have a bite of a lobe of kola nut and hand this to the bride, who will equally drink some of the palm wine, eat a bit of the kola nut, and then will dance around and show her husband. Take note that, like I said, during the introduction of both delegations, the groom is deliberately not introduced. And so this is the first time when he is officially presented to both families. And once the two are presented, they are now, while the two families now go into the actual traditional marriage rites themselves, which, like we know, is the Nchande'eh.
Ceremonies going on. There is the Nchande'eh, which is a private ceremony, and there is the Ewonge, which is a public ceremony. So those are going on at the same time.
Yes.
And at this point, the two
Yes.
families are withdrawing from the public and going away to finish the Nchande'eh.
Yes, I was coming to that. Oh. Now the Nchande'eh, they have used the couple for the very first time. The two close doors for actual Nchande'eh rites, which is the payment of the bride price. Now, when they go behind closed doors, the very first thing is that the bride's family present once more the list of the items they need if they have to give away their daughter. And the items which are brought by the groom's family are now presented and inspected. And may I note here that no matter how few the items are, the Bakossi man generally believes that if you provide all the items given, demanded in the exact quantities in which they are demanded, then you have disregard for your wife-to-be and her family. It seems like you've gone to a grocery shop and you see the price of an apple or something and you pay the exact amount. We believe that you are not actually buying off the wife that you're getting married to. You are just giving something symbolic to the family to show your intent. And so normally these discussions run for several minutes, sometimes perhaps even hours, because it takes a lot of negotiation. Because intentionally the groom's family, if they are demanded, say 5 bags of salt, may decide to bring 4 to show the love and respect that they have for the bride's family. And once all of this debating is done and the items are accepted and the symbolic amount for the bride price too is paid, there is now some celebration among the two families. They give out that cry of joy, that ululation, what we call the so in Bakossi land. They will seren so and dance and sing for some time. And may I also state that even the amount of money that is given is very symbolic. The amount is not specific. It varies from family to family, but something symbolic must be given to the parents. Something symbolic is given to members of the mother's family of the bride and the bride's father's family. So it's just symbolic amounts that are given to uncles and cousins and the parents and grandparents. Now, once these items have been handed over and accepted and this celebration begins, the next very significant thing is that there is a traditional oath taking. And this traditional oath taking is not between the future bride and groom. It is not between the bride and the groom. It is actually between the two families. Like I said, marriage in the Bakossi context is purely an African affair. And so it is the head of the bride's family and the head of the groom's family who do what we call the MELENG. The MELENG is the traditional oath they are taking. So it must not necessarily be the father of the spouses. It is the heads of the two families. Now they take the cock. They use a cock, and each of them is given a few grains of sweet alligator apple seeds, dry alligator apple seeds. Each of them are given a few grains. They chew, and they sit facing each other, each of them holding the wing, one wing of the cock.
The cock.
And usually, when they sit and face each other, they are now swearing and taking an oath. The oath comprises of two things. Each of them is telling the other that they have given their children in marriage wholly, without any deficiency and without reserve. And they are giving these children, they are promising that they will never, by form of witchcraft or sorcery or by any means, affect their child or the children that they will give birth to. Not in terms of witchcraft, not with any pestilence. Okay, so like I said, the MELENG is the traditional oath taking, and this MELENG or the traditional oath taking is usually between the heads of the two families. They are taking an oath that they will not affect their children that they have given in marriage wholeheartedly with anything malicious. And so each person is telling the other one that as I'm giving my child, he is whole, he is in his full senses, he has no deficiency, I've not given him with reserve. And as I am giving him, I expect that he will live like in this state in your house, or not affect him or his children with anything malicious. Rather, he now pours out his blessings by praying for the gift of children, fecundity, that they should be productive, that they should acquire wealth, that they should be able to build houses and live in peace and harmony and bring up their children as well as their children's children. And so these vows are exchanged between two families. Once they have exchanged these vows, this cock is now killed and it is roasted. It is not prepared. It's not cooked like a sauce or anything. It is only roasted, and the different parts are shared to the members of the delegation who are there present. But the right wing and the leg of this cock is tied together with one of the intestines and handed over to the couple, because this now they can either eat it there or take it to their home, and only two of them are expected to eat of this. It is like they are bonding or tying this oath that has been taken by their parents. Okay, so after this leg and the wing, right wing has been handed to the couple, the father of the groom now presents a lamb to the family of the bride. And the significance of the lamb is because we know that the lamb is a very peaceful animal. It is very obedient and calm. And once he hands it over, the father of the bride now, using the lamb in hand, addresses the bride, calling on her that while in her matrimonial home, she should behave like the lamb, as meek as the lamb, as peaceful as it, so that they can grow. And then eventually this lamb is killed and the different parts are shared raw to different members of the delegation who are expected to take it back. And then the father of the bride hands over a gift of a hen to the couple. And the symbolism of that gift of the hen is so that he is blessing them with the gift of fecundity, that they may be able to procreate and have many children. And so he gives them, wishing them all of that.
The point at which they get married is when the actual point they are married is when the two heads of the families exchange they do the traditional oath. After those
Yes.
oaths, they are married. So when the lamb is brought, it's just a blessing. But they,
Yes.
thank you, thank you.
So after that, all of these blessings have been given. It now creates room for the celebration and ululation and dancing and merriment. And usually in the yesteryears, at this point, the groom's family would usually insist that their wife should be brought to them immediately. And this will be done in what is called a Soombeeh. And so if it were two nearby villages that were separated by even a distance of 2, 3, or even up to 8 kilometers, they may start moving that night, carrying the different gifts given by both families. Most especially, these gifts usually comprise of kitchen utensils to the new home of the couple. But when this is not possible, the people just continue in dancing and merriment. At this time now, the couple is usually introduced to all of the rest of the guests as a couple that has been tied in marriage.
Thank you, Your Majesty. I appreciate you walking us through every step of this process. Now, I just want to ask, how is divorce regarded amongst your people? Is this something they frown upon? And how is it ensured that they don't get to this point?
Well, divorce was completely anathema for the Bakossi man. We really do not have any regard or any consideration for divorce in the process, because generally, for all of the reasons that a man could possibly divorce his wife, or the wife could possibly want to divorce the woman, we believe that we could always find solutions. Even if it were that the man was eager to have children and there was a situation of barrenness, his wife will go back either into her family or into the village and get a young maiden who will come and give birth to children for the husband. And generally, it was believed that these children were the children of the first wife, and she had the responsibility of bringing them and loving them because that is their real mother. In the case where perhaps the man was the problem, if it were an old man, he will look around the village for a disciplined young man and who was equally very hardworking, and will introduce him to his wife and just tell the wife that this young man will be helping you in the farm, also be cooking for him. And that will be a direct message to say that you could give birth to children. But the rest of the world knows that those children were the children of the man and will bear his name and will have a right to everything that belongs to him. So generally, the Bakossi man frowned very seriously at divorce, the idea of divorce. And we generally believed that it will mean that your father will have to hand back all of the items brought for the bride price. And since many of the times this did not happen, even if a woman eventually walked out of her husband's house, she may live with another man, but may never have the opportunity of the new husband paying the bride price. And so even if she had children in the new marriage, her husband, who had duly paid bride price, can lay claim on those children eventually. And when in the future she even dies, the husband can lay claims over the corpse and will be the one to decide how, when, and where the wife he had duly married has to be buried. And so generally, the Bakossi man has no consideration for divorce. But in the worst case scenario, if it has to do, then the two families must sit together and the family of the bride must symbolically hand some items back as the bride price. But on a general basis, this is generally not done. That is why the parents take a lot of time to ask their daughter whether they should go ahead and drink and eat or receive the items that have been brought, or whether they should not.
Your Majesty, what I hear is that it is also so important for the parents to do their part in the investigation, to do their part in questioning the daughter, and to do their part in making sure that the people who are getting united are actually thinking seriously about the consequence of their action, because there is no turning out of this. As far as they're
Yeah.
concerned, you cannot come back and tell us you want a divorce. So we make it so difficult for you to get in that.
Yes. I think parents generally play a very important role in marriage. That is why in the Bakossi customs and tradition, in the upbringing of a child, the mother's role is preparing her for a wife. And so even if we have education in school now, you have to get the certificates and all of that, but your mother has the responsibility of preparing you for marriage. And one of the things that is always said during marriage ceremonies that stands out in the speeches made is always the idea of perseverance. And that is why you see even in the items given, one of those items given is a lamb, which is a very perseverant animal. The families always have the role of struggling to reconcile the couple when problems arise. But except in very extreme cases, divorce is anathema to the Bakossi man.
So in case they are having trouble, who do they turn to? Who can they go to? What's the order? Do they go to their parents, or who? What's the recommendation for them to turn to resolve issues?
It is traditionally an exchange. It is traditionally an exchange. The boy will believe that the mother of his wife will always have a soft spot. And so you always try to, just like when you're negotiating the bride price, in the traditional diplomacy that is used, the groom's family will always want to use somebody very close to the bride in that family to be able to reduce the list of items to get the same thing like, so it is usually those kind of people who have a role to play. There is no traditional link, but generally the Bakossi man believes that the mother of a bride will have a lot of influence on her, and the father of a bride will have a lot of a groom, of a husband, will have a lot of influence on him. Given that when you look at our own value systems of education, it used to be that a man is going for hunting accompanied by his son, is going to the farm or for tapping accompanied by his son. And so there is a bond between them that when problems arise, he may appeal very easily to the conscience of his son, while the mother, who has spent a lot of time with the daughter in the kitchen, they spend time in the farm, they spend time while fishing, they spend time at the stream, will also have a soft spot and will know how to advise the daughter. But generally, as much as possible, the families concept and concentrate their effort on reconciling them rather than facilitating the tax of divorce.
Okay, and sometimes there is the question about there is a civil marriage, there is a church ceremony, and then there's the traditional marriage. When do the Bakossi people believe that the couple is married? Is it when they finally go to church? Is it when they sign the documents at court? Or is it when they do the traditional marriage? Are they regarded as officially married, please?
The term marriage in Bakossi is a wonge. And a wonge, when we say you have done your wonge, it is when you get married traditionally. We believe that the mayor, the role he plays has only come with modernization. The pastors only came with their religion yesterday. In the yesteryears, the MELENG, the traditional oath taking, is the same thing that the mayor is giving you a paper today, or it's the same thing that you go to church today and you exchange rings. And so we believe that once a couple is married traditionally, going to court, to the council, may just be for purposes of your jobs, and then perhaps to safeguard your property that you may eventually acquire. But we believe that it is very binding when you celebrate your traditional marriage. It is marriage for us. There is no other one that we consider greater than that.
And for people who disregard going through the divorce process because they could quickly jump into a courtroom and grab divorce papers, what word would you have for them in terms of they've gone through this ewonge, this thorough process, and then they think, I'm far away from home, I don't need to get there and take care of this. How important is it for them to go back to their families and make sure that this is unraveled, or that they give a chance for reason before they try to say they are divorced?
Yes, remember that the oath-taking ceremony, what we call the MELENG during the ewonge, is very, very serious, and it is something that has very unpalatable sanctions, whether it is in the form of infidelity or whether it is the parents who try some form of witchcraft or this. Generally, our belief system, we know that there are very, very serious sanctions when you go against that oath which both families have taken. And that is why in many of the cases, when you go ahead, we believe that the effects of the going against the MELENG may follow you. Perhaps you may get into a new marriage and you remember, you may get into a new marriage and then strange things start happening to you. But even if you get into a new marriage and everything goes well, the husband you get married to, at the moment when you have to pay your last respect, he cannot lay claim to your corpse. That is the person who has the privilege and the right to determine the kind of funeral you have is the husband who duly paid bride price on you. And so except it is fully refunded, you remain his wife. That is what tradition knows. And so even your parents, if you divorce without their consent, they cannot receive bride price on you. And we know that even in the councils and in churches now, they verify to make sure that you would have gone through all traditional rites before they can engage in matrimony. And so the immediate effect is that once you divorce in court, you cannot officially get married again, because since your parents cannot receive bride price, it cannot proceed in court. That is what we generally believe. But beyond that, there are the effects of the oath that was taken, which may be childlessness or some other malicious thing that may happen to you.
In effect, our courts and the church are saying, you could come to church for a blessing, you could go to court to have the legal documents done, but marriage is really a family affair. And without that family part taking place, nothing we do can really make you married.
Yes, I think it is a good aspect that the courts recognize that.
And for those who may not be able to make it to their family homes, say those in the diaspora, those in the cities, I would hope that in the cities they can make it home, but say in the diaspora, they're far away and it's costly to make this trip home. And are there ways of accommodating them? Do they allow substitutes to sit in place of a man and a woman, or is it even necessary to have substitutes in the ewonge?
Yes, generally, like I said, that marriage has always been a family affair. It is very possible for the couple to be represented by some of their family members, either a brother or a sister or a cousin. Because even when it used to be by system of childhood betrothal, the child is present but is incapacitated, does not have the right faculties to take that decision. And so it was the parents who would decide for what was known as the Nkwe'entan, the little baby, the Nkwe'entan. It is the parents who take that decision on their behalf. And so it is very possible for that representation to be done. But in the case where the representation is done, Usually, the parts that are handed to the couple are not handed. The whole of the cup is just killed and distributed. Anytime that the couple comes home, the both parents now, even without taking the oath again, can decide to kill a cock and then give both of them that part while repeating the same words, wishing them blessings and then cautioning them against anything malicious.
Your Majesty, we cannot thank you enough. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge. We pray that you continue to be blessed and that you take our best regards back to your people.
Thank you, and thanks for the honor. It was such an honor sharing such insights on our custom and tradition. The best I can advise my sons and daughters who are out there is that our customs and tradition are our identity. It is our identity. They are so rich that we can make life out of it. Our cuisine is extremely rich. Ero and other dishes from the Southwest have gone international. Mpupa has gone international. I think that there is a lot that we can make to develop ourselves and our communities if we harness the richness of our culture. I think if you look at the Ndabechum, which is the Bakossi man's house, it is such that if we harness that architecture, even very beautiful hotels can be built using that design. And so we commend you and your team once more for the wonderful job you are doing. We are always here to share these insights on our rich culture. Thank you for having me on your program.
It is customary to remain standing when in the presence of His Majesty, so I obtained his permission to be kneeling throughout this interview. By the time we got to the end, it was painful. So it occurred to me that the journey to uniting Africa's people, the journey to understanding our customs, the journey to being united and understanding what changes we could make, is not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be full of pain, but it is worth it. I encourage you with that. Get to know about your customs, get to know about your people and what obtains where you're from. I am Mano Ndoakono, saying until next time, thank you for responding to this summon.